What is up, y'all? It has officially happened. The Lions have named their offensive coordinator. John Morton is set to be the next offensive coordinator of the Lions. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. I got to keep the volume on the down low. All right, we got live streams happening right now. Currently, I'm in Mobile, Alabama, man. All right, we're getting ready for the Senior Bowl. I told you I'd be here. I'm here, and news is breaking. As soon as I get here, news breaks. But I'm like, I got to do a video on it. We got to talk about this. This is sneaky. This is a very sneaky name because this is a name that we had talked about before. I remember doing the video when we initially hired him and we brought him in as a senior offensive assistant. And I remember really liking the background of this coach. And then they kind of forgot about him. And the reason I forgot about him, he was only here for one season, lands with Denver, pass game coordinator, and he's been doing a terrific job over the last 2 seasons. And the Lions go out a little bit under the radar, slide over, bring him back in, and now John Morton is back with the Lions to be their next offensive coordinator. Now, this may sound like kind of a who is this kind of guy. It shouldn't. And I actually have an old video, so if you want to check that out, because this is going to be on the shorter side before we do a full deep dive when I get back from Mobile. This is going to be about a lot of draft stuff. If you want to go check out that video, you can, because that was before he was hired as their offensive coordinator, and I broke it down up to that point. But now we have the Denver tenure that we can add into this, as well as what he did with the Lions, or at least what the Lions did when he was here. But we have to go through the quick background, because John Morton has been an offensive coordinator. He has experience. He did it for a season with the New York Jets. And one thing that I remember highlighting, and I could remember because I had this old graphic, I just pulled this from the old video. I remember highlighting what the Jets got out of their quarterback, right? You go back to the Jets, Josh McCown in 2017, the 1 year he's the offensive coordinator, and he has the best season of his career. I mean, completion percentage, 67%, that's first. Josh McCown completed 67% of his passes, okay? First, 18 touchdowns to 9 picks. That was the best, most touchdowns he's thrown in the season, and the most yards he had in the season. It was still sub 3,000. But it was a great season for Josh McCown. And then offensively as a team, their statistics did go up in that season. So it wasn't like if you just put the numbers out there, you'd be blown away by what they did in terms of passing as an offense. But what you can look at is the way that Josh McCown improved as the quarterback for that season. On to his next stop, which was the Raiders. And that was a weird situation because apparently he got fired from the Jets. Todd Bowles was the head coach at the time. He didn't like how much to do was throwing the football. He's like, okay, let's move on from this guy. Remember, Todd Bowles, he's a defensive guy. Josh McCown's your quarterback. You're probably trying to run the ball, shorten the game, lean on the defense. This dude's trying to throw the ball. There was a sequence against Carolina that season. They threw the ball 3 times from the 1 yard line, didn't get in the end zone. Dude gets fired, right? And it was a difference in philosophy, okay? There was never like, oh, he didn't do a great job because the numbers all improved. It's difference in philosophy. So he goes to the Vegas Raiders, and with the Raiders as an assistant, he steps in there as a senior assistant, and Derek Carr has the best 3 seasons of his career while he is there. Obviously, he had a season over 5,000 passing yards one of those years. 2019, the first season, improved in terms of touchdown to interception ratio, highest yards per attempt that he's had. His completion percentage jumped up to almost 69%. And that's a consistent thing that you'll see when you constantly look at John Morton and where he's been. His high completion percentage, we've seen it over the last 2 years with Russell Wilson and Bo Nix as a rookie. And he saw it again here with Derek Carr. He's creating more explosive plays. He went from 17 big-time throws in the first season to 37 the next year to 41 the season after that. And again, well, there's the knock of maybe throwing the ball too much. Look at the rushing attempts. He's typically kind of in the middle of the pack and how much their teams have ran the football when he's been with an offense. So it's not that he'll never throw the ball. And for the Lions being hired as their offensive coordinator, I think of Ben Johnson. I think of his background within the passing attack, and that's mainly where he came from. That's where he worked his way up for the Lions. And I think this is very similar for Morton. And remember the key for Dan Campbell, it was make sure Goff is comfortable, make sure he continues to play at this high level. That's the investment. We need that to be right. And he was here for 1 season with the Lions. After that Raiders stint, it goes really well with Derek Carr. Bring him in as a senior assistant. Now, again, I don't want to put this on Morton, but he had his big year, right? This was the year that Jared Goff took off. He went from the 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, finished the season on a strong note, to 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, the 9-8 record, of course, that season. And everything improved for Jared Goff across the board in that first season. And John Morton was there. And that's really when the passing attack took off for the Lions. So then you look at the rushing attempts and you're wondering, okay, are they just throwing the ball all the time? Again, he's typically towards the middle. Even if you go through the last few years, like this past season, 13th in rushing attempts with Bo Nix. Year before that, 18th in rushing attempts with Russell Wilson. So still middle of the pack. Year before that with the Lions in 2022, 13th most rushing attempts. He's left, the rushing attempts each season have gone up. 2023, 500 attempts. 2024, 534 attempts. That was the 3rd most in football, and it's been on a slow rise. The year before Morton got there, it was at 21st in rushing attempts. So that's slowly worked its way up in terms of the Lions have actually just ran the football more. I think some of that is just being on the field more often. They're scoring a lot more as an offense. You convert at a much higher level. You're constantly on the field. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So while yes, he does tend to lean very pass heavy, and there seems to be kind of the impact everywhere he goes, I don't think that we can just take that and be like, well, that's going to be a major problem, because I think of Ben Johnson, and, people would criticize him for throwing the ball too many times. I never had an issue with it because there was always a plan. My thing is, if there's a plan and you got the players that you can execute it, and we've seen it happen, I don't have an issue with it. Just execute the play. And I think what Morton's done a really good job of, and we'll do a deeper dive on this, is he constantly makes the passing options very available to a quarterback. There's a lot of in-breakers. There's a lot of mesh concepts. There's a lot of over routes. You see it on third downs to set up. There's a mesh concept to set up. Get this guy open. There's a lot of that. And then another key aspect is typically teams don't take a lot of sacks unless your name is Russell Wilson when you're with John Morton as well. Now, again, we can give credit to the offensive line. Denver had a great offensive line. But think about how much that improved over this past season and the last couple of years, which is the new information that we can gather. Bo Nix and Russell Wilson. Think about it. Russell Wilson this past season had a fantastic year statistically. Now, I think some people walked away like that didn't look great. He took a lot of sacks. Maybe he didn't want to put the ball in harm's way a few times. Maybe that's true. But he had a great statistical season, completed a very high percent of his passes, and it was like, okay, this guy's back, right? We give credit to Sean Payton, and then he goes to Pittsburgh, move on to Bo Nix, and he's still working there. So clearly, however much impact he has, clearly Sean Payton likes him, because Sean Payton keeps him around to now work with the rookie quarterback. And the rookie quarterback's, completing a high percentage of the passes like he did in college, but he's got a lot of big time throws. And I can understand some of the concern with the turnover-worthy play rate for Goff in 2022, how high that was, and then if you're throwing the ball more often, like 13th in rushing attempts that season, how you're allowing the defense to be more opportunistic and be in positions to take the football away, though I don't think this is like a major outlier, so it's not super concerning just by the numbers alone. This is where the marriage has to happen between Hank Fraley and Dan Campbell, understanding that they still need to run the ball, where them being second most in attempts this past season is important, that's vital, but then you have to look at the flip side, because if you look at it, it's not like Josh McCown had a massive outlier in turnover-worthy play rate, and Derek Carr's 3 highest seasons in yards per attempt were all under John Morton. And personally, I love the aggressiveness. Yes, did we throw some picks in the championship game where you're like, maybe we shouldn't have tried that? Sure, the first one, absolutely. The Tampa 2 coverage, probably not the best decision. But the one before half, again, I didn't hate it. It was the right coverage read. So for me, I typically lean into being okay with the aggression, right? If it's smart aggression, if the concept sets up for it to be a beater. Things happen when you push the ball down the field, and if you're throwing the ball more, you're putting into situations where the defense can play more coverage. Things happen. But as long as Lions continue to lean into the run like they have been in recent years, and it's continued the uptick, I'm personally fine with the aggression. I love it because I think, as Ben Johnson pointed out, quarterback play is the biggest determining factor right now in winning. And I think for a guy like Goff, we need him to be aggressive for the Lions to get to their peak as an offense. That's when they're at their best, is what it looked like this past season. So even though you get the Houston games, his aggression allowed him to come back, not worry about it, and still find a way down the stretch to deliver. Obviously, you don't want those games, but that's life, and I'm okay with living into that. Specifically, if the concern is less, what decision did he make? Oh, wow, did he just force it into a tight window? Versus if it's, hey, there's a coverage beater and something bad went wrong because you had the right coverage read, like Houston, where he had one-on-one with Laporta and he got bumped off his route and he gets picked off. Again, the context does matter to those things. So if it's just a terrible coverage read, he's like, I'm just going to push it downfield, because that's not good aggression. But if it's aggression because the play call design beats the coverage, I can live with that all day. This is a guy that constantly, everywhere you look, has had success within the passing game. He's worked with receivers in the past, but I think the key comes back to making Goff comfortable, and he's been within the system, so clearly there was something there that Dan Campbell liked. And remember, Dan Campbell from Sean Payton, if Sean likes him, I'm sure Dan likes him as well for similar stylistic reasons. And even if you see a guy like Bo Nix, it felt like a lot of the play calling too was, hey, let's be smart, let's be protective about this. I thought on third down against the Bills, they looked messy. They looked like a team that didn't have a veteran quarterback that was prepared for those situations. But on the schedule, they were a team that really took care of Bo Nix from what I had seen so far. Check downs, swing routes, screens, allow him to get comfortable in the game. So I think he did a really good job there as well, where you see the low turnover-worthy play rate, just molding to the experienced quarterbacks that he had, versus Goff, who has more experience, where maybe he can dial up the aggression. I think with Hank Fraley becoming the run game coordinator, and you think about Dan Campbell, he's not a defensive guy. Dan Campbell's open to throwing the ball. Dan Campbell didn't have an issue with the 3rd and 1 deciding to throw it. I didn't either, because the play was there, and he's like, yeah, we wanted to attack. We liked the matchup that we had on Bobby Wagner, and it was there. Things went wrong, and you get the sack up. But the reality is Dan Campbell was cool with that. He was cool with that aggression. And I think that John Morton has clearly brought that, is he hasn't been afraid to be an aggressive offensive mind, and the proof is in the pudding that it typically delivers, right? High completion percentage, a lot of touchdown, interception ratio. It's all really good. Everything cross-board, passing yards go up. He throws the ball a healthy amount, but typically he's in the middle of the pack there. But usually the passing numbers get better when John Morton is around. So I think this is a very sneaky hire, because it wasn't like in-house with Tanner Engstrand, but it is a guy with more experience than a guy like Tanner Engstrand, or a guy like Scotty Montgomery, who did have experience at the college level, a little bit different here. And Scotty Montgomery, not the same experience, I think, at the NFL level, like with the passing game, as he had in the college, right? John Morton has specifically worked with the passing attack in the NFL, even over the last 2 years. So he's right in the mix of it. And this is going to be his next opportunity to be another offensive coordinator. And I remember at the time, it was like, this guy's got a heck of a background. He could mean a lot in the pass game. Be ready to hear his name a ton. Go check out the old video. I think we heard it a ton, but they had a fantastic season. So overall, John Morton's the Lions' new OC. We'll break this down a little bit more as I get back home, or maybe at some other time. We'll be live on Bleacher Report, 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. And stay tuned, man. We got a lot of draft content coming from Mobile, Alabama, in person. I'm going to leave it there, though. Welcome, John Morton. I'm pretty excited about this one. This is a sneaky hire. Go check out my old video if you haven't seen it, and I'm out.